Chapter 371 Scream from Within. By Heidesgrain. I'm so sorry for exposing everything just like that. I was just worried about my own position and didn't think about whom I was talking to. I'm truly sorry. Jason was not really sorry, but he gave his best to make it seem like this. While Milan just mumbled that it was better that way, Iska stared into Jason's eyes that didn't show any signs of being sorry. This told Iska that Jason was slyer than he imagined. I didn't know that Milan was unaware of his family's business, however, it looked like Jason was aware of that. Weird. Who is that guy? However, Iska didn't think that it was bad for Milan to get to know that his family was currently taking the wrong path. Not only was the Jewel clan allying with foreign races, in order to receive certain cultivation and body refining manuals, which is something almost all big families and clans were doing, but in exchange, the foreign races get their hands on innocent people. Iska was not a hypocrite, and he knew that the Meldor family, to which he belonged, was also colluding with foreign races. But it was different than the Jewel clan, who seemed to have obtained the recipe to create an addictive cultivation drug from foreign races too. The Meldor family gave up on true criminals in exchange for all kinds of manuals. Some may say that this is not better than handing out innocent people, but Iska had a different opinion there. Furthermore, what made Iska wonder was the fact that Milan was unaware of everything. Neither did he know about fabricated evidence, which is used to enslave innocent and in most cases, strong, young talents from the lower society layer, nor did he know about the addictive cultivation drug. From the looks of it, he was also not aware of the fact that his body refining technique belonged to exactly these foreign races. Maybe he wanted to avoid every responsibility as well as possible, but that was not something Milan could do for his entire life. He had to face everything head on or perish. As such, Iska said with a calm and soothing voice, "Don't take it too much to your heart, Milan. It's not like you are responsible for your clan's behavior. In the end, every big family has to collude with the foreign races in order to prevent being destroyed by other big clans. If one clan doesn't have a pact with foreign races, all other clans would prey on it, as the manuals provided by foreign races are superior to everything mankind can acquire. Even the manuals within ancient ruins should be worse than those we obtain from living foreign races. They're alive, at least, and this has a reason, which should be the superior techniques." When Jason heard what Iska was saying, he couldn't help but frown, thinking that it was never fine to exchange someone of his own race to receive manuals from the foreign races. On the other side, he had to acknowledge that it would be somewhat difficult for other clans to fight against someone with a refined physique head-on. The difference would only widen the stronger one became. Jason felt that he was already stronger than most of those so-called prodigies that entered the Mythic Garden, solely because of his great physique. It was only refined up to the 4th expert rank, but he was already stronger than most 7th expert ranks solely from his physique if one were to disregard the baptisms and amplifications he received. However, there was still a large difference between Iska's clan, who colluded with foreign races a few times to receive a few manuals before severing contacts as well as possible, which was what Jason imagined them to do, compared to the Jewel clan, who seemed to have become too greedy to receive more resources. It was likely that they tried to become the overlords of Khanir and reign mankind. Jason couldn't help but think that the Jewel clan might be as problematic as the Drake family, if not worse, which was something he already expected, yet didn't want to accept. It was frustrating to see something like this, and Jason began to wonder if there was at least one big clan that treated everyone fairly. In his opinion, treating prodigies better than others was not bad, because prodigies had to protect the weak, untalented humans in the future. However, that also had its limitations. Milan felt slightly better after he heard Iska's words, even if it was hard to digest what his family had been doing for the last few years. What has our clan turned into? He began to wonder as they arrived in front of Iska's other friends that ventured into the Mythic Garden. Some of them knew Milan and became acquainted with him a long time ago during multiple occasions where the big families and clans made events to celebrate all kinds of things. Sometimes, there were also small tournaments to determine who the strongest prodigy in their generation was. As such, they approached Milan and talked to him, which distracted the frustrated youth. This lifted his sour mood, and both Iska and Jason couldn't help but think that Milan was strong enough to overcome this obstacle. "I know what you did there. It might have been harsh, but I guess it was better for Milan to understand everything sooner rather than too late," Iska suddenly said, which caused Jason to flinch before he nodded his head. "I can partially understand why big families tend to think that they need the foreign races to advance, but this way of thinking won't work forever. Right now we are not a threat to these races, but once we become too strong, they become too greedy or need something, they will stop toying with us, which is what they're doing by trading their manuals with the big families. We should be prepared for the worst and stay independent, that is at least what I think, and I hope that your clan didn't establish a soul contract with the foreign races, saying that they will support each other in war or something like owing a favor to the foreign race. The latter would be bad, as it meant that the foreign races could order your clan to do everything. However, that is not my business and it shouldn't concern me. Unfortunately, I already saw too much in the last few months and it's more shocking than expected." Jason ended his short speech, leaving Iska with a confused expression behind. "We have a soul contract with the foreign races, but it doesn't state something like waging war against other humans." Wait. F***CK. Iska realized that Jason's words made sense as he recalled their soul contract's exact words. In the event of an ambush from other foreign races, the Thudra race will help out the Meldor clan under the condition that the combined forces don't halt before the other party is completely annihilated. In the beginning, every one of their clan was overjoyed when they signed the soul contract with such a beneficial clause, but Jason's words allowed Iska to think everything more skeptical as he mumbled. "Don't halt before the other party is completely annihilated. What if one individual of the foreign race attacks us with their human allies?" He thought that their clan had always been one of the smartest, but thinking about that one clause was already devastating for Iska. They never accepted anything else, only manuals in exchange for the worst of the worst criminals, and they rejected many soul contracts, only to be led by greed as they received many benefits from said soul contracts which they signed, thinking that they could exploit the Thudra race. Both Jason and Iska needed some time for themselves to think about everything. While Iska tried to think of a solution to get his clan out of the frustrating situation, Jason's thoughts didn't linger on the big families, or the prodigies he could see all around him. Rather than that, he decided to focus on his main task for now. Thinking of finding, testing, and contracting one of the cursed beasts Iska and Milan named. There were 3 beasts whose curse suited his demands, which was much more than he expected. Only 2 among these 3 were feasible to catch and contract, but Jason couldn't help but feel that the 3rd beast might have something for him. He was unsure why he thought like that, but everything within him screamed towards him, trying to tell him that he shouldn't contract the debilitation centaur or one-eyed rat. Instead, Jason should focus on the petrification serpent, according to his gut feeling that told him so. Yet, this sounded ridiculous to him as he could barely estimate how strong that beast was. Something like that never happened to him before, and it was as if his entire being was speaking towards him, which was creepy. The closest occurrence to what he sensed right now was the time his soul world found the black origin flame which his mana eyes couldn't perceive. This event was exactly what caused Jason to think that there might be something he overlooked. "It's not like I'm in a hurry right now. If I absorb lots of mana within the mana vein for a few months, I can either try to catch a debilitation centaur or one-eyed rat. That is if I can't find something else." Jason was suddenly dragged out of his train of thoughts when he heard Suo, who had already calmed down, shouting that they would venture deeper into the cave. Apparently, it wouldn't take too long for them to arrive nearby the mana vein as long as they took the correct path towards one of the frustrated halls that were connected to the mana vein. There was nobody who was not confident in their strength, but everyone respected Suo's choice that was more level-headed than Jason estimated it to be. There were too many strong beasts within the mythic garden, and there was a reason for such a high death rate. Chapter 372 Exposed by Hydesgrain. From the looks of it, Suo seemed to be able to think calmer than Jason expected. That was after their small incident that occurred barely a few minutes prior. Jason was unsure if he had to fight against Suo in 3 months because that was just something he said without any meaning. However, if Suo challenged him in 3 months, he wouldn't back off. Instead, Jason was confident to reach a combat prowess comparable to that of a peak master rank, without the need to let a soul bond occupy his mana core. That way he would be weaker than Suo, but it was not like he relied on his common combat prowess for anything either way. In the worst case, Jason was confident that he would be able to fight Suo head-on by using his fortified soul conjunction and Black Origin Flame. As such, he was unbothered by Suo's anger towards him. Nevertheless, Jason couldn't help but think that Suo might be smarter than he estimated him to be. Was he just fooling around before? Or is that his personality? Like having a serious attitude but being hot-tempered. He didn't know about that and decided to not mind it for now as he followed Iska and Milan, both astonished about the information Jason hinted at. Meanwhile, the Light Affinity Meerkat and Horned Lightning Panther, that were both beasts at the lowest lick state, couldn't help but eye their masters weirdly, not knowing what to do as the gaze turned towards Jason. They stared at him as if they wanted to say, "You caused this mess, fix it." Sighing deeply, Jason decided that it was best if he were to talk to them in order to distract them from thinking too much about their clans. "I didn't ask that yet, but how old are both of you?" This was a simple question, but it was enough to drag Iska and Milan out of their trains of thought. "I'm 18 years old and Milan is still 17 years old, Iska said before returning the same question. "You two must have a great mana aptitude, considering that you've already liquefied a drop of mana and Milan will also enter the lick. Magus rank at or below the age of 18. That's great." He didn't answer Iska's question because he was suddenly reminded about Malia, who was younger than both Milan and Iska. However, she wanted to enter the lick stage before this year was over. Jason knew that this was unlikely for her to achieve this year, even more so after he had heard about what happened to Asterix. He still didn't know what happened to any of the Flays and if they were safe, however, he could feel that they were still alive, which was the most important thing for now. Iska and Milan couldn't help but feel a little bit proud about their mana aptitude, which caused them to brag for a moment as Iska asked Jason about his age once again. Not actively listening to his new friend, he just answered, "I'll turn 15 in a few months." While he continued thinking about Greg, Malia, and the Flay parents, Milan suddenly exclaimed, "You are what?" Drawn out of his train of thoughts, he began to wonder what was going on when he recalled what he subconsciously said. "My stupid mouth." He cursed inwardly before thinking of a lie as he said, "I mean 17 inches. Unfortunately, his try to fix the mess he created was ignored because Iska, who stared at him intently, detected his lie. "You have yet to turn 15. How?" Jason was glad that there was nobody else around them because he dragged them further away when he wanted to distract them from thinking about their clan. Nevertheless, the fact that he exposed himself so easily was embarrassing, and if his masters were to find out what kind of pushover he was, they would laugh at him, at least Shane. "Let's say that I'm younger than both of you and that my mana aptitude is especially high." Further, before Jason was able to finish his sentence, Iska suddenly intervened. "You don't have a relative with an extremely high soul world amplification, right? That's you. Otherwise, why would someone who is not even 15 years old try to enter the Mythic Garden, instead of waiting 2 more years? With your strength, it would be stupid to enter the Mythic Garden. However, in 2 years you would be much stronger. The only reason for your family, clan, or whatever you have as backing to allow you to enter the Mythic Garden right now, would be to find a cursed soul bond. It's similar to my case last year with the Debilitation Centaur, just a little bit more shocking." Why is Isker so quick-witted? Jason lamented before he nodded his head. There was no need to lie right now, and instead, he could clear the mess he created for good. At least they're distracted now. Clearing his throat, Jason said, "It's true that I don't have a relative with a high soul world amplification, and it's also correct that my soul world amplification is high. I hope that nobody will tell anyone about my age because it might complicate everything. It's not that I have to hide my age, but it's better that way if you two can understand that. I can't wait to bind a weakening cursed soul bond because my body is already on the brink of tearing apart and I can barely restrain it because my soul bonds don't enter the L. Magical rank." For a few days, he was uncomfortable with calling beasts at the lowest lick stage, magical ranked beasts, while the same applied for humans. It felt weird, but it was not as important as the situation he was currently inside. It's true that you wouldn't be taken seriously even though your talent should be extremely high and superior to most prodigies here, but having a combat prowess comparable to that of a peak master, if now newly advanced magical ranked beats while being younger than 15. That's truly shocking. Either way, I have no reason to tell anyone about it, Isker said, and Milan nodded his head before adding, "I won't tell anyone about it too. That might be out of context, but how high is your soul amplification that you already need to curse it at the age of 15 inches? Without a reason to lie to both Isker and Milan anymore, Jason decided that it was fine to let the others into one of his secrets. My soul world amplification is roughly 33%. My mana core rank is at the expert rank, which is not extremely unique at my age, but I have 2 peak unblemished ranked soul bonds. 33%. They already expected his soul world amplification to be high, but it was much more than they expected. Yet, Isker was able to retain calmer than Milan as he mumbled, "That's why the debilitation centaur's curse is too weak." Jason nodded his head, feeling like he made some friends, even though they only got to know each other for a short period. This was because both Isker and Milan seemed genuine when they talked and reacted, which was also the reason he told them about his secret. It might have been an accident that he revealed his age, but it was definitely better to expose the rest before turning into a mysterious young man that attracted everyone's curiosity more. Not knowing something is sometimes worse than knowing something shocking. While the three continued to talk with each other about all kinds of things, their main topic remained Jason's high soul world amplification. Isker and Milan weren't even jealous about Jason's soul world amplification because they heard the fairy tale about the cursed prodigy way too often. Rather than feeling jealous, they pitied Jason to a certain extent. He lived with the constant threat of tearing apart, which was mentally taxing. It might be advantageous at some point in the future, but for that to happen, several decades had to pass until Jason's soul world reached its limit. For that to happen, it had to be filled with soul bonds that reached their racial limit, without a single space left for another soul bond. However, Isker and Milan could tell that Jason had a major reason to look out for a strong soul world amplification curse, which was probably his soul world's size and the possible affinities he should be able to bind. Following Suo and his small group of close subordinates that walked around as if they were Mythic Gardens overlords, Isker and Milan tried their best to think of multiple more possible cursed soul bonds for Jason after he told them that his soul world was larger than they might expect. Jason only revealed this after they asked, and both Isker and Milan felt that Jason's sincerity to let them into their secret, despite not knowing each other for a long time, was worth helping him to their best extent. Thankful for their help, Jason told himself that he had to remember this favor to repay it once they needed him to. Chapter 373 Potentialus by Hydesgrain. Walking through several dozen cavern tunnels for multiple hours, they encountered several more beast groups. Fortunately, none of them was strong enough against the force of more than 100 prodigies with their soul bonds. Most soul bonds were already at the lowest lick stage, which was not surprising, given the fact that these prodigies hailed from strong families. As such, it was not a difficult task to catch a beast at the lowest lick stage beast or abduct a cub. However, what astonished Jason was the fact that most prodigies didn't fight with their soul bond. Rather than that, they forced their soul bonds to utilize their affinity without thinking that it was required to let them fight in close combat. After Jason sized up everyone's mana core in a detailed manner, he concluded that most prodigies had a combat prowess close to that of a lowest lick stage or had crossed this combat prowess already. Jason noticed this unbothered, and he was only attracted by some affinities he had never seen before. There was even someone with a blue wind affinity which he found extremely interesting. Unfortunately, Jason was unable to approach this person because she was surrounded by several underlings and pursuers. Seeing that, he couldn't help but stay away from her even if the young woman's elemental affinity was interesting. During the fights against multiple beast groups, Jason found out that Milan and Iska were a well-matched team. This told him that they had already fought together, probably multiple times. Adding Jason, who was good at adjusting himself into their team, the three massacred their way through the opponents. This allowed the other prodigies, who were also holding themselves greatly against their opponent, to break through. There were only a few powerful beasts that required the help of several lowest lick stage soulbonds and humans who worked together. However, what made everyone doubt was the fact that there has yet to be a low lick stage beast, or also called late magical ranked beast. Rather than that, there were only a few mid-magical ranked beasts that appeared, and none of them harbored a curse. Yet, the closer the group of prodigies came to their final destination, the more noises they could hear. These noises echoed through the whole cavern complex, which told everyone that there were powerful beasts fighting against each other. In the beginning, these noises didn't cause much ruckus within the group of prodigies, and they were able to remain calm until they deciphered the sounds of three particular beasts. FCK. Milan suddenly said as his face paled. Jason was wondering what shocked Milan so much, and averting his gaze he saw that everyone's face was as white as paper. His mana eyes were fully utilized, and he knew what was going on far ahead, several hundred meters in front of them. A few minutes earlier he had injected more mana into his mana eyes, which allowed him to see mana fluctuations and details in the distance better. As such, Jason was fully aware of what happened nearby the mana vein, whose dense mana currents distracted his mana eyes from the beast's mana fluctuations in the surrounding area. However, he was still able to decipher all beasts before anyone else, thus he not astonished when Iska suddenly said, "I understand why the Boneflame Centipede and maybe even somehow why the Petrification Serpent is below the surface, but what the hell is the demonic three-eyed wolf doing here?" Nobody was able to answer Iska's question because everyone was wondering about the same thing as their expression soured. Only Jason was able to remain calm. What he currently saw was favorable in multiple ways. First, he figured out that they were close to the mana vein, which was definitely a good sign. On the other side, there were so many beasts Jason could see, and all of them were trying to approach the mana vein to receive more benefits. This allowed him to see the second advantageous fact. Not only were the Boneflame Centipede, the demonic three-eyed wolf, and the Petrification Serpent fighting against each other with all their might, but there were also several Crimson Death Hell Spiders and other strong cursed low-lick stage beasts. Thus, Jason could say without any doubt that there was a huge massacre happening. Furthermore, the number of dead bodies littering the ground was already enormous. However, there were still other things Jason noticed as his eyes squinted for a moment before he smiled lightly. He stepped towards the end of the cavern hall, before entering the tunnel next to the one that would have brought him to the mana vein without waiting for Suo or anyone else to say anything, as he saw something attracting his attention. The only problem was that he couldn't see it perfectly, and that was after he injected more mana into his mana eyes. Unfortunately, Iska and Milan noticed his departure and regained their composure before they rushed towards Jason to hold him back. "What the hell are you doing?" Jason had already forgotten that he was inside the cave with Iska, Milan, and more than 100 more prodigies. Scratching the back of his head he plainly said, "Don't you hear that the noises are mostly filled with pain and not as vigorously as they should be? If my guess is not wrong, there should be many strong beasts fighting against each other, and I doubt that the demonic three-eyed wolf or any other beast will be strong enough to fight against several hundreds of thousands of mid-magical ranked beasts. Jason was aware that he exposed a lot of information right now, but he didn't say the most important. Not only was every beast he perceived with his mana eyes injured, which included the three most terrifying beasts, but the potential indication colors enveloping the demonic three-eyed wolf, bone-flame centipede and petrification serpent were extremely weird. The demonic three-eyed wolf had a dark blue color enveloping it, while the bone-flame centipede was enveloped by the thick purple color. This told Jason that they were an extremely strong beast with the potential to reach the Guardian or even Lord rank, which was comparable to the mid and late Lick stage. However, more confusing was why nobody even thought about encountering a Guardian ranked beast. Everyone was worried about the most terrifying cursed, peak magical ranked beasts, but that was it. Ignoring Iska and Milan, who were thinking about his words, Jason asked, "Why are there no Guardian ranked beasts inside the Mythic Garden?" Distracted from thinking about what Jason said before, Milan subconsciously answered, "There had never been a beast above the peak magical ranked inside the Mythic Garden. Maybe it's a restriction." When Jason heard this, he was confused because he was reminded about the green planet he saw just a few weeks before, when he had stepped through the Mythic Garden rift. Isn't the Mythic Garden a whole planet? How can the whole planet be restricted? He began to wonder, confused about what Milan said. Jason was unsure whether his assumption was right or wrong, but it was clear that Milan didn't think that there had been a single Guardian ranked beast before. As such, his mana eyes were either wrong or there was something wrong with the Mythic Garden. Does it not only restrict who steps through the rift but also how strong one can become inside a certain area, which is the Mythic Garden itself? That's good, I guess. Jason was glad that it seemed to be impossible to become stronger than a certain rank because he wouldn't have to face stronger opponents than the three beasts at the most terrifying beast ranking. Furthermore, all of them were at the low Lick stage, which meant that Jason had a chance to fight them in a year or so. However, if he were to consider his growth, the Mythic Garden might expel him for being too strong. That was if he would be able to enter it a year from now. This was not his plan, but nobody could say what would happen in the future. Nevertheless, the most shocking was neither the information that there was an advancement restriction for beasts at the low Lick stage nor the fact that the demonic three-eyed wolf had the potential to reach the late Lick stage, or also called Lord stage. Rather, it was the petrification serpent with two particular facts. He saw the petrification serpent's strong man fluctuations, which he had only seen 2 times in his whole life. Not only was Jason completely unable to see its true color, but there was also the fact that he could see several different mana fluctuations within the petrification serpent's body. They were still alive and close to each other, the size of one's fist. The petrification serpent is about to lay its eggs. Chapter 374, Just Like Artemis. By Hydesgrain. When Jason perceived the 24 living beings within the petrification serpent's body, he began to wonder if the serpent ate some beasts alive. However, after Jason saw that the fist-sized beast's mana fluctuations were similar to the petrification serpent and that he couldn't perceive the most egg's color that enveloped them, he couldn't help but feel shocked. They don't have a color enveloping them, just like Artemis and the Black Origin Flame. While the Black Origin Flame didn't have any potential to start with, Jason was unable to tell what Artemis' potential was, as the color enveloping her was something between every color and colorless. It was as if there were some kinds of fluctuations around her, trying to tell him something, but that was it. Seeing the same color around the petrification serpent and some of her future offspring, Jason couldn't help but feel excited as he began to walk through the tunnel, ignoring Iska and Milan behind him. Meanwhile, Suo was able to regain his composure, and he had started to convince a few prodigies to approach the mana vein, even though it would be extremely dangerous. Motivated by the benefits they could obtain, Suo and his group went inside a different tunnel as Jason picked. "Dumb fool," Suo just said, loud enough for everyone to hear. However, Jason, who heard Suo too, didn't bother about the Jewel clan's descendant, thinking that he was way too annoying and immature. Instead, he inserted more mana into his eyes, thinking that it might be helpful to perceive more from the huge battlefield that occurred around the exposed mana vein. The path he took might have been the wrong one to enter the cavern hall that led him towards the mana vein, but Jason could tell that this was the dumbest thing one could do right now. At least if one was not suicidal. As such, he took a tunnel that led him to the outer branches of the exposed mana vein where only a few weak beasts tried to gain benefits. Nevertheless, Jason couldn't even think about absorbing mana right now, because there were too many thoughts rummaging in his head. Why is the petrification serpent enveloped by the same mysterious color, and why is the same color only around a few of its eggs? Is that some kind of rare occurrence? But then, what does the mysterious color mean? If what I assumed to be was not wrong, it would mean having an unlimited potential, but, wait. Milan said that the Mythic Garden restricts one's mana core advancement to a certain extent. This was to prevent every living being inside the Mythic Garden to reach the Guardian rank, or rather the state between low and mid-lick stage. Pondering about all kinds of things, Jason was unsure whether he should be happy or not to have figured out something so precious, because his desire to bind the petrification serpent intensified. If and only if my assumption is correct with the color indicating a beast to have an unlimited potential, the petrification serpent should be the most suitable soulbond for me, that is if its curse is exactly like Iska has told me. Jason knew that there could always be some mistakes and exaggerated facts when one told someone else a story. From what Jason understood was Iska never directly targeted by the petrification serpent's weakening curse. As such, he could only tell what others said. As such, Jason tried to figure out what exactly the petrification serpent's curse was, which led him to turn Suo and his group into the first guinea pigs for his experiment. From the mana fluctuations and the enlarged mana core size, Jason could easily tell whether Suo and the other members of his group would receive a soul weakening curse or an entire weakening once they were targeted by the petrification serpent. Iska and Milan followed Jason, worried about his behavior as they saw him staring through the wall with a radiant smile on his face. This caused Milan to look at Jason with a weird expression when Iska began to comprehend that Jason's easier words didn't hail from what Jason saw but from what his mana eyes perceived. He really does have mana eyes. Mana eyes, a great mana attitude, and a terrifyingly strong soul awakening. Who, or what are you? Since he encountered Jason, Iska couldn't help but become more and more curious about the golden-eyed youth. It was already rare for Iska to be curious about someone, but Jason was completely out of the ordinary. He not only made Iska curious, but he was also drawn in by Jason's weird aura, which caused him to rub his eyes as he saw his bright shining, golden eyes. He is still a human, right? Iska began to wonder suddenly, without any reason to doubt that Jason was a human. While Milan tried to make sense out of Jason's behavior, Iska began to wonder what Jason was exactly looking at. It could have either been the mana vein, the beasts fighting nearby the mana vein, or seeing Suo run into his inevitable death. Suddenly, Milan made a step forward as he wanted to approach Jason to figure out if there was something where his new friend was looking at when he kicked a small stone. This distracted Jason lightly as he averted his gaze from the petrification serpent that was exactly like Artemis was. He couldn't help but feel enlightened and happy, even though his mood plummeted at the frustrating thought that he was unable to form a soulbond contract with the petrification serpent. How often do cursed magical ranked beasts lay eggs? Jason suddenly asked, which caused Milan to halt in his tracks. Looking at Jason in confusion, both Iska and Milan didn't know what they should say to that. It took them a while before Iska was finally able to say something after he thought about a possible solution. Probably once every few decades. Maybe only once every century. However, if you add the Mythic Garden's weird restriction into account, it might be even less than that. So it's extremely rare. But what about the Crimson Death Hell Spider then? Isn't that too much of a coincidence? Jason began to wonder, only for Milan to add. If you're talking about the mythic garden, there are certain periods in which most beasts bear offsprings. It should be in like a dozen years or so. Maybe even longer than that. During that period, even more prodigies want to enter the mythic garden. Everyone wants to try catching the offspring of one of the most terrifying beasts. Just imagine binding one of the strongest blessed beings inside the mythic garden, or in your case the petrification serpent. Jason couldn't help but smile at this thought as he said, "Yeah. How lucky that would be, right?" After he received the answer he wanted, Jason turned back towards the direction where the mana vein and terrifying battlefield was as he stared at the petrification serpent. "Even if you bear your offsprings, I won't be able to get one." "Right," Jason thought, as he witnessed how the petrification serpent used both curses it harbored to not only weaken its opponents but also curse them with its petrification curse. This curse paralyzed lowest lick stage beasts to a certain degree and turned beasts below the lowest lick stage into stone statues. From what his mana eyes perceived, the petrification serpent's curse was not what he was searching for. This disappointed Jason for a short moment, even if he was awestruck by its combat prowess, until he recalled that Iska told him that the petrification serpent's weakening curse was like the debilitation centaur's curse, varying with the different races it cursed. Suddenly, when he remembered that, Jason couldn't help but think. Even if humans receive a soul amplification curse, what will happen to me? Am I counted as a human, a mutant, or a Celestia? This was something Jason didn't think about in the beginning because he forgot that he was a halfling and only a human to 50%. He was only able to calm down when he saw Suo and his followers entering the cavern hall, where they almost immediately encountered the petrification serpent close to them. Staring into each other's eyes, Suo's whole soul world amplification vanished, as the petrification released its weakening curse before its gold-brownish eyes seemed to envelop Suo's entire being. He was already at the lowest lick stage, but he couldn't help but feel that his entire being was paralyzed. When Jason saw this through the wall, his worries about the fact that he was not an entire human vanished as he mumbled. "It really has a soul world amplification curse, an extremely strong one at that." Chapter 375 Abandoned by Hydesgrain. Staring through the wall, Jason wanted to watch the whole event that occurred within the underground hall next to the mana vein, as the tension seemed to increase with every moment passing. Suo's soul world amplification had been completely nullified through the petrification serpent's weakening curse. Adding the petrification curse the petrification serpent utilized to target Suo, his body was also unable to move a single inch. This sensation remained only for a short while because the petrification serpent averted its gaze to the other young prodigies with which it did the exact same. In the end, the weakening curse would be in effect for several hours, while the petrification curse would either wear off after a few seconds or remain permanent. The latter would only happen if one was too weak, unable to prevent being petrified by the petrification curse. In that case, the curse would remain forever. Targeting several hundred targets at once with its weakening curse, the petrification serpent had to use up a large margin of its stored mana. Adding the mana consumption while fighting against other, strong and cursed beasts, in addition to the fact that it had to protect the eggs within her body, by not letting itself be hit at or injured at certain areas, the petrification serpent was slowly becoming weaker. The shallow injuries on its body increased, and Jason could tell that it was at a huge disadvantage. Only its petrification curse was preventing any beast from approaching it too close, as it didn't consume much mana. One could compare the petrification curse to a mutation to the petrification serpent's eyes. It was not exactly that, but the petrification serpent's petrification curse was similar to Jason's mana eyes at a certain point. His mana eyes had a passive effect to see the mana flow consistently. Furthermore, there were multiple effects Jason could use with his mana eyes, like the abyss effect, and the ability to perceive different colors enveloping animate and inanimate things, showing their potential and quality. Through these multiple abilities, Jason was able to comprehend that his unique mana eyes were similar to the petrification curse that cursed the petrification serpent's eyes. There was also a weakened curse that was passively released, while the real weakening curse had to be actively activated. When Jason saw this, he became even more interested in the petrification serpent, only to shake his head when he saw how fast, strong, and ferocious it was. The petrification serpent had already sustained severe injuries next to the shallow wounds, but it was still able to fight against two of the most terrifying ranked beasts in the Mythic Garden and a few additional lowest lick stage beasts. They were fighting against each other, but from Jason's perspective, it looked like most beasts were targeting the petrification serpent. This was not really surprising because the petrification serpent's weakening curse was extremely strong and it was even able to take on the demonic three-eyed wolf's destructive curse with a blink of its eyes. It was as if the demonic three-eyed wolf's destructive curse was nothing against the petrification serpent that began to wreak havoc once it noticed that its situation began to worsen. Suo and his team were still standing between the tunnel they had emerged from a few minutes before and the cavern hall, not knowing what they should do against such terrifying beasts. It was not that there were only 3 terrifying beasts, but also several Crimson Death Hell Spiders and more than 300 other cursed lowest lick stage beasts with a few dozen liquefied mana drops. At that sight, one couldn't help but be scared. The surrounding area of the small, exposed mana vein was just too terrifying, and Jason was sure that he wouldn't approach the exposed mana vein directly. After more than 10 minutes passed, the petrification serpent's combat prowess had drastically decreased, and it was most likely scared that the eggs within it might be damaged if it were to continue fighting, that it started to retreat. Escaping through a tunnel, the petrification serpent didn't even notice that it slithered past Suo and his team, which it had cursed only a few minutes prior. Meanwhile, Suo and the others stiffened as the petrification serpent used the tunnel they had come from. Suddenly someone among Suo's group mumbled, "Isn't it going to encounter the others we left in the cavern hall?" Suo couldn't help but nod his head, but rather than caring about the others, he thought that their own situation was not favorable and his eyes began to quiver in fear. When the petrification serpent began to flee, the beasts that attacked it started to pursue it, only to halt when the petrification serpent had brushed past Suo and the others. Escaping from the cavern hall, everyone wanted to remain to absorb the thick and pure mana radiating from the exposed mana vein. The other beasts couldn't help but feel that they had to defeat the uninjured, energetic newly arrived opponents first. As such, several dozen beasts roared out, showing the desire to attack Suo and his team as they charged towards them. Everyone's legs trembled for a moment and Suo was the first to regain his composure. However, instead of helping the others, he turned towards the cavern tunnel which the petrification serpent had used as he started to run into it, abandoning his other team members. When Jason saw this, he couldn't help but frown, but if he were to be honest, it was not like this reaction was surprising as it came from Suo, whom he found to be extremely sly. While the trembling prodigies tried to regain their composure in order to run away from several dozen low-lick stage beasts, Jason only saw how they were torn apart, which caused him to sigh deeply. Averting his gaze towards the hall where the remaining young prodigies were still inside, he couldn't help but hope that the petrification serpent would continue fleeing instead of wasting its time by killing everyone in the cavern hall it was about to emerge in. The young prodigies in said cavern hall heard that something was wrong and unsheathed their weapons. However, when they saw the petrification serpent that had sustained hundreds of light and a few severe injuries, the young prodigies couldn't help but shiver for a moment. Everyone's soul world amplification vanished in the blink of an eye as the petrification serpent brushed past them. It ignored their whole existence because it thought that multiple cursed low and lowest ranked lick stage beasts were pursuing it. As such, every second was precious. When Jason saw this, he sighed in relief before he turned around to Iska and Milan, who were looking in the direction of the entrance hall they left a few minutes ago. Nothing happened there. The petrification serpent fled from the battlefield because there were too many strong beasts targeting it. However, it didn't injure a single prodigy cause it was too occupied with its own business. Smiling lightly, Jason could see that Iska and Milan were confused before they sighed in relief. Once he had said this, Jason decided that it was time for him to look out for a path towards the outer branches of the exposed mana vein. He could already tell that the huge and terrifying battlefield with lowest and low-lig stage beasts, that cursed each other with all kinds of horrific curses, was about to come to an end. Every beast inside the surrounding area of the exposed mana vein was injured, and Jason began to wonder if the remaining young prodigies will be able to take care of everything when he saw that multiple more, new, uninjured beasts arrived. "That's bad fortune," he mumbled when he saw this. However, even worse was that the young prodigies, who heard all kinds of painful roars and screamed echoing through the cavern hall, were sure of the fact that it was finally their time to shine. Rushing through the cavern tunnel from which Suo emerged, everything turned into a chaotic situation filled with fear, greed, as Jason lost interest in the others. "Will you two come with me to look out for a reclusive and secure area where we can absorb mana from one branch of the exposed mana vein?" Chapter 376, Small Mana Vein by Hydesgrain. Iska and Milan didn't expect Jason to be so confident about finding a branch of the exposed mana vein, in a reclusive area at that. While Milan was not sure where Jason got this confidence from, Iska began to wonder if Jason saw something through his mana eyes. However, even if Jason was not sure where to go in order to find the place he was looking for, Milan knew this place, from several maps he had studied, like his own home. As such, both agreed to Jason's proposal before they set off, not minding what exactly was going on behind them. Everyone was on their own, and it was not their responsibility to take care of the descendants of the other families. Milan tried to recall where they had to head to in order to find a place similar to that Jason described. As such, he was in his own train of thoughts while following Jason, who knew where they had to go. All of this was thanks to his mana eyes and a large amount of mana he inserted into them. When Milan saw what paths Jason took to walk through the cavern halls and tunnels as if he had been living inside the cave, he couldn't help but be shocked. Iska thought that Milan's pride might be hurt by that thought, that explaining the situation might not be the worst, considering that Jason was too much of an unknown factor. He was extremely mysterious, and Iska was curious about which family he hailed from. "His eyes don't seem like common mana eyes. I think they are pretty strong ones too." When Milan heard this, he could barely refrain from exclaiming loudly as Jason entered the next cavern tunnel. This explained a lot to Milan, and he understood that Jason didn't even have to think if they were going down the right path or not, because he knew it. Nevertheless, more than an hour passed had before the group of three emerged in a cavern hall that had the site of a basketball court. There were only 2 tunnels leading towards this particular cavern hall, and the one they took was one of them. Satisfied about the cavern hall he entered, Jason turned around to Iska and Milan, who looked at him with a faint smile. They already noticed that the mana density and purity was much higher inside the basketball court-sized hall they entered, as Milan said. "I don't know this place. Is this hall new, or why was it not drawn into the maps I've studied?" Milan was curious about why he didn't know anything about this place, but in the end, it didn't really matter to their current situation. More importantly, was that Jason's mana eyes lead him to a branch of the exposed mana vein, and that there was not a single beast around. Meanwhile, the young prodigies and Suo had regained their composure after they calmed down from the chaotic situation they had encountered after the petrification serpent escaped from the exposed mana vein and the big cavern hall which they entered now. Several thousand corpses littered the ground, and there was not a single low-lig stage beast left, which astonished but also overjoyed the young prodigies. They would have to give up on the mana vein if there were to be powerful beasts left behind. However, their number of low-lig quest stage beast corpses was 0, which told everyone that not a single of the most terrifying ranked beasts within the mythic garden died. The prodigies, led by the greed, started to collect the beast carcasses, and only half an hour had passed before the whole cave was cleansed from corpses. After that, they wanted to approach the mana vein as close as possible, only to notice that there were multiple beasts right next to the mana vein, absorbing its mana. In the beginning, these beasts, that reaped the benefits for arriving as the last on the battlefield, didn't bother about the young prodigies. at least until they approached them, which caused the beasts to open their eyes as they roared out and charged at the prodigies that summoned their soul bonds. However, before they were even able to clash with each other, several beasts had emerged from the surrounding tunnels, which caused both the beasts near to the mana vein and young prodigies around to stiffen. "We're F-seeked," was what everyone had in their mind as one of the descendants from a larger family suddenly said. "Let's not think about the mana vein anymore. We have to survive in order to become stronger. Let's retreat first." Everyone was reluctant to retreat, but the sheer number of beasts that arrived in the gigantic cavern hall, which was lightened by the mana vein, was enough to indicate their inevitable death if they were to force their way towards the mana vein. In the end, they couldn't be sure that there wouldn't be other beasts that wanted to reap benefits from the exposed mana vein, which would obstruct them in absorbing mana too. As such, they decided to charge through a certain tunnel without many beasts before caring about how to leave the underground maze they entered. "Suo, you guide us again," a bulky young man ordered, not caring about the fact that Suo belonged to the Jewel clan anymore. After they saw their comrades' corpses and how Suo acted after he encountered them, the young prodigies that remained in the prior hall before couldn't help but despise him. It was obvious what had happened, and knowing that Suo abandoned his team members in order to save his own skin was something they couldn't accept. At least not from a descendant of a big family and the leader of the group at that. Suo, however, couldn't care less what others thought about him because he was already glad to have survived the onslaught of beasts that caused his prior team's death. As such, he accepted the bulky youth's behavior for the moment. Time would tell who would live longer and whose hypocrisy would kill one, sooner or later. Jason knew that something like that would happen to the other prodigies if they were to think that the exposed mana vein belonged to them alone. There were several tens of thousands of beasts that wanted to reap benefits from the exposed mana vein, only to die. It was only obvious that the stronger beasts wanted to be as close as possible to the mana vein, which would mean that they had to find a way to the underground. The exposed mana vein was called like this as the short period where a mana vein would release its excessive mana would be exposed to the surrounding. This would influence several hundred kilometers around the mana vein, which means that being close to the mana vein was enough to reap benefits. These benefits would evidently be fewer the further one's distance to the mana vein was. As such, Jason, Iska, and Milan could have remained at the cavern entrance, absorbing mana while reaping benefits from the mana vein, as the mana there was already denser and purer than further away. However, mankind was greedy and Jason was no exception. Nevertheless, he had his greed under control, which was the reason for him to use both his greed and mana eyes to find the most suitable position to absorb mana. As desired, Jason found a reclusive and secure cavern hall right next to a branch of the mana vein, which was similar to being right next to the mana vein itself. Jason's passive mana absorption accelerated by several times, and he couldn't help but think that absorbing mana right here would be perfect for him to break through mana ranks. "If I stay here for several months, I might be able to liquefy my first drop of mana," Milan exclaimed in joy while Iska nodded his head, adding, "I might be able to create my second drop of mana, maybe even a third if I can enter a fully focused state. That's great." Both were happy, and Jason couldn't help but smile brightly as he summoned both Artemis and Scorpio. They were still looking like they were beaten up harshly, which soured Jason's great mood as he took several perfectly purified potions out of his spatial ring, which he infused into his soulbond's mouth. When Iska and Milan saw how Jason's soulbonds looked like, they couldn't help but frown, but seeing how Jason treated them, their frown turned to a faint smile. "You already encountered a few problems inside the Mythic Garden before you met us, right?" Milan asked as he offered Jason a few higher-graded potions. Declining the offer by telling Milan that his potions were perfectly purified, he added, "There were a few problems, but I think my soul bonds became stronger through this hardship." Averting his gaze from this soul bonds to Iska and Milan, he said, "We should absorb mana for several months, right? Our soul bonds should be better guards than we are. They can absorb mana and pay attention to the surroundings at the same time." That's fine with you too, right? Everyone nodded their head and their plan was set in stone. With 2 lowest lick stages and 2 peak unblemished ranked beasts, there shouldn't occur many issues within the reclusive cave hall they were currently inside. As such, everyone began to make preparations to start absorbing mana for several months. Chapter 377 Advancement by Hydesgrain. Almost 4 months later, the basketball court-sized cavern hall was filled with thick mana currents, permeating the air with dense and purified mana. Suddenly, Jason, Iska, and their soul bonds were flabbergasted by Milan's overjoyed shout. "I did it! Yeahh!" Barely being able to prevent disrupting the mana flow within their bodies in order to deter injuring their mana veins or mana core, Jason and Iska took a while to stop absorbing mana as they turned to Milan. "Congratulations! You're only 17 years old and you've already liquefied your first drop of mana," Jason said, and Iska added. "It took you a while, but once you know how to liquefy mana drops, it will become much easier. Maybe you can become like Uncle Tilgrail and enter the Lord stage in your 50s. Quote. When Jason heard this, he almost blurted out, "You know Till." But fortunately he was able to refrain himself from doing so. According to his estimation, the Mythic Garden Rift would remain open for slightly more than 40 days, which meant that they absorbed mana for less than 4 months. This was perfect and allowed Jason to search for his perfect soul bond for good. He felt refreshed and much more powerful than months before, while the same applied to everyone within the cavern hall. It was sad that they had to leave now, but everyone had things to take care of within the Mythic Garden. While Milan entered the lowest lick stage by liquefying his first drop of mana, Iska was able to create his third drop of mana. He was able to absorb enough mana to start liquefying the 4th drop of mana and started the liquefaction process thanks to the enormous amount of mana within the branch of the mana vein that was exposed to them. It would take some time, but Iska was confident that it would take a few weeks at most. Since he had liquefied his 3rd drop of mana, he figured out that the liquefaction process was much easier than he had initially thought. As such, his cultivation progress would accelerate. Both Milan and Iska's soul bonds received equal benefits, allowing them to liquefy 2 drops of mana. Jason and his soul bonds were completely contrary to the others. Artemis and Scorpio had stored lots of mana, allowing them to reach the highest degree of the peak unblemished rank. This meant that not only their mana core was filled to the brim with dense and pure mana, but that their mana channels were also flooded with mana. While this was about to hurt Scorpio, Artemis used the excessive mana to refine her blood that was already infused with mana. Thanks to that, her strength increased even though her mana core rank didn't change. Jason was worried about Scorpio for some time, but after he saw that he was fine, Jason could take care of his own matters in relief. In the end, Jason's strength seemed to have changed the most. While Iska didn't have a body refining technique, Milan had one. However, it looked like Milan focused on liquefying his first drop of mana, which was exactly what he should do. Yet, Jason did not only absorb mana but also refined his physique with the Netherworld's 4th body refining technique. Once in a while, he practiced the Heaven's Hell technique too. It took him several hours, but somehow, it calmed him down. As such, it was not bad for him to change his routine once in a while. Thanks to that, his soul energy reached 30,000 units, which Jason wanted to leave for his next soul bond. Nevertheless, he thought that having 20,000 vacant soul energy units would be enough. As all 3 of his soul bonds required around 2,000 soul energy units each, he had 4,000 soul energy units left to use, which he initially wanted to give the Black Origin Flame. Shocking enough, Jason noticed that something substantially about the Black Origin Flame changed. Under normal circumstances, allowing a beast to annex 1 soul energy unit would allow a soul-bound beast to take 1 soul energy unit. Yet, the Black Origin Flame had to annex 4 energy units to possess 1 soul energy unit. When Jason noticed this weird behavior, which he couldn't understand in the beginning, and he had to look at it in a detailed manner, What he didn't expect to see was that the Black Origin flame burned 3 soul energy units with its flame to nurture itself in order to be able to take hold of 1 more soul energy unit. This was something he never heard about, however, unfortunately, there was nothing he could change about it. It was not like he was able to force Solaris, which was how he named the Black Origin flame after it had begun to complain that Artemis and Scorpio had names and it didn't, to not burn the soul energy it annexed. In the end, it had to burn 3 soul energy units in order to annex 1 more. This means to increase Solaris's soul energy by 1000 units it had to burn 3000 units. As such, Jason had to give the Black Origin flame, Solaris 4,000 soul energy units to increase its power output. When Jason noticed this, he was a little bit frustrated about the outcome because his origin flame seemed to burn and destroy much more soul energy than it could obtain. However, in order to nurture the Black Origin flame, which would also increase the Black Origin flame's strength, Jason had to accept the deal. Annexing 4000 soul energy units, burning 3000 of them, and taking over the remaining 1000 soul energy units, the Black Origin flame, Solaris was now Jason's strongest soul bond with 3002 soul energy units. Its affinity with all combined abilities was strong enough to face foes with strong mana-based attacks. During these last months, Jason's mana core broke into the first master rank, which was a lot faster than he expected. This allowed him to reach a mana core size of a 3rd master rank without any amplification, as the 2 baptisms he had received from Solaris were very useful. Adding his amplifications, Jason's mana core reached the size of an average 9th master, while his physique was even stronger. Thanks to the fact that he was able to refine his physique inside the cavern hall that was filled with dense and pure mana, his body refining progress accelerated by a large margin too. Everyone was slowly packing up their stuff, and Jason began to wonder how high his limit was currently. If Artemis or Scorpio enters my mana core, I should be comparable to a newly advanced lowest lick stage. Adding my 3 affinities and the refined physique, I should be strong enough to fight normal lowest lick stage beasts too. I think. Jason's advancement was extremely fast, and he was able to reach the goal of attaining the combat prowess of a lowest lick stage at the end of the month without any issues. His prior goal to liquefy his mana before the end of the year might have been a little bit too much, but it was always good to be ambitious. Furthermore, Jason was confident that his progress would accelerate by a large margin as soon as contracted a soul-amplifying cursed beast. After everyone was done packing, Milan, Iska and Jason left the cavern hall with the Light Meerkat, Horned Lightning Panther, and Scorpio following behind. Artemis didn't want to walk through the narrow tunnels, thus she entered Jason's soul world without hesitation. "What are your plans after we're out of the cave?" Jason asked both Iska and Milan, who had to think about it for a moment. "I'll probably search for a few treasures, and suitable blessed beasts," Iska said without a real goal left. He was not as desperate as Jason to find a suitable soul bond. He just wanted to adventure through the mythic garden a little bit while reaping a few benefits. Meanwhile, Milan's thoughts seemed to be a little bit more in-depth as he answered. "Initially, my family told me to overshadow my brother and make me look like I'm more capable than him, but after what you two told me, I don't know if that's something I want to do. Maybe I search for a few other big families and ask them about how the Jewel clan really acts. Currently, it looks like everyone wants me not to know anything, but I might be able to change that, at least to a certain degree. Even if I'm unable to find out more. I want to thank both of you for being honest. I still hope, somehow, that you two lied to me, but I see no reason for you to do so." Jason couldn't help but smile apologetically as comforted him by slapping on his shoulders. "Let's get out of the cave first, and then you can find out more about your family." Chapter 378, Why Is That Thing Here? By Hydesgrain. It took them almost half a day to leave the underground, maze-like cave, and everyone was glad when they were able to breathe fresh air again. On their way outside, Jason noticed that there were still fighting beasts in the surrounding area of the exposed mana vein. This told him that his plan to look for a branch of the mana vein had been the most reliable because they didn't encounter a single group of beasts. Thanks to that, everyone was able to focus on becoming stronger without being distracted. The moment they had stepped through the illusion rune, a pure white magic circle manifested on the ground as Artemis emerged out of it. Soaring into the air, Jason was able to sense her joy, which caused him to smile. "Where are you going first?" Iska asked, curious about which cursed beast Jason wanted to search for first. This was something Jason was pondering about too. On one side, he was sure that the debilitation centaur's curse, which would decrease his soul world's amplification by 10, was too weak. However, on the other hand, there was also the point that Iska said that the debilitation centaur's curse depended on the targeted being's race. This was the same curse the petrification serpent had, only that the debilitation centaur's curse should be considered a lower-ranked curse. From what Jason perceived when he saw that the petrification serpent weakened Suo and his team with its curse, it was impossible to be a simple 10% decrease in one's soul amplification. It might be a race occurrence with normal soul awakenings, but Jason doubted that the prodigies around Suo had all a soul world amplification of 10%. This was if one were to consider that the average of a soul world amplification was between 5% to 10%. In that case, one might think that not many would have a soul world amplification above 10%, but the average for prodigies was slightly different because their soul awakening was on average better than that of others. With parents from big families that had high-graded soul awakenings, descendants were more likely to receive strong soul worlds too. As such, the normal soul world amplification for prodigies was likely to be between 8% to 15%. Most prodigies with a soul world amplification of 15% had either a 4-star soul awakening or maybe even 4.5 stars. Jason hadn't heard of anyone with a 5-star soul awakening yet, except the one from the fairy tale Dahlia had told him. He had yet to meet someone with such a high soul weakening ranking by himself. However, without a strong mana aptitude, even the best soul awakening would end up disastrous. Jason had a superior mana aptitude, but even he had problems thanks to his soul awakening. His vessel was not enlarging and being reinforced as fast as he could bind a new soul bond. This was problematic, and the reason for this was either that his soul world amplification was too high or that his mana absorption was not on par with his soul awakening. Jason didn't think that the latter was the case because he hailed from a foreign race. Furthermore, the Celestia race seemed to be feared by other foreign races too. As such, his mana absorption rate should be much higher than it currently was. If he were to be able to absorb more mana than nature was releasing, he would still not be enough to be on par with foreign races. Argos was a just new planet that had awoken its mana, and it was still weak, slowly becoming stronger with each year passing. This told Jason that the other existing planets had much more mana than humans had, which made everything just worse. His train of thought was focused on escaping Argos, and he was already thinking of the big picture. This caused him to wonder why his mana absorption was so weak. If someone else were to hear Jason's thoughts, they would either try to beat him up or cry in the corner of a room. However, Jason's thinking was already in a completely different league than others. He might be weaker than the majority of clans and families, but his advancement speed was faster than theirs. As long as he had everything under control and his soul world amplification was adjusted, Jason was confident to become stronger at a rapid pace. The only thing he required was time. Right now he had enough of that, but who could reassure him that this wouldn't change? Nobody. This meant that Jason had to become stronger as fast as possible. There might be times when he had some peace, but to maintain this state one would have to work hard. After he told Iska and Milan that he would go to the flatlands inside the Mythic Garden, where the debilitation centaur's habitat was, they bid each other farewell before they took their own paths towards their designated goal. Only 5 minutes after they separated, Jason had ordered Artemis and Scorpio to enter his soul world. While Artemis entered his mana core, he took out the pitch black mask which he had already cleaned. Putting on the mask, he manifested Artemis wings on his back before she ascended in the air. His altitude remained low, but flying through the air was much faster than running, even more so after he and Artemis strengthened each other. Artemis was only at the peak unblemished rank and Jason's mana core size was at the peak master rank. However, once Artemis entered his mana core, they strengthened each other. This strengthened Artemis wings, allowing Jason with Artemis wings manifested to be slightly faster than Artemis could fly. At least if their weight had been the same as Artemis, which was unfortunately not the case. Artemis was still lighter than Jason, even in her enlarged form. This meant that the speed plummeted slightly. Nevertheless, Jason was still much faster compared to running through the forest with the weightless steps technique exerted. Furthermore, there were no beasts he could see all around him. Every single time his mana eyes perceived something, he changed his altitude, which was enough to avoid other beasts that were unable to sense his minuscule mana fluctuations. Being able to conceal his mana core was one of the most efficient techniques mankind created, and Jason was still wondering if mankind made their own techniques by adjusting foreign race techniques. Drink that removes papillomas and parasites overnight. One simple trick to relieve knee pain permanently. At least that was what he imagined after thinking about the mind-splitting and concealment technique. They were so powerful, yet created by mankind, which was something one would never expect from a race living on a newly mana-awakened planet. While Jason was suspicious about these two techniques, the Heaven's Hell technique was something else. Other races couldn't even bind beasts, which was exactly what made mankind such a valuable resource for those foreign races. As such, mankind couldn't have adjusted a foreign race's technique to increase one's soul energy, because something like that shouldn't exist in the first place. While he was deep in thoughts, Jason had already left the reclusive area of the Mythic Garden. He could simply fly in between two small hills, passing devilish mountain goats that targeted him with their curse before manifesting several hundred icicles which they shot at him. Their curse was not strong, but he was still baffled as he used a large margin of mana to erect a shield out of black flames half a meter behind him. This protected him from the majority of attacks, and the other icicles didn't hit him. After this incident had occurred, he continued to fly away, ignoring the devilish mountain goats which one couldn't see within the thick snow layers. Jason continued to fly for a few more hours before the curse he was targeted with had worn off. He was not even sure what kind of curse the devilish mountain goats harbored, and the only reason Jason could think about was that his mana eyes used up a small margin of mana to negate the curse he received. This told Jason that it was most likely a curse about one's mind or emotions. These were the only options he could tell, because he didn't know anything else which would trigger his mana eyes passive negating ability. When he had entered the flatlands, he found many flying beasts in the sky which forced him to descend to the ground. From the looks of it, he would be more secure on the ground. At least as long as he was inside the flatlands. Searching for the debilitation centaurs shouldn't be too difficult, because Iska told him that they were a large horde of them. As such, he started to look out for them with expectations filling his mind. It was only half an hour later that he saw a large horde of horses that had a humanoid upper body rushing towards him. This made him almost exclaim in joy until he saw something he never expected to see in the flatlands. Why the hell is that thing here? Chapter 379, Unstable Curse by Hydesgrain. The demonic three-eyed wolf seemed to pursue and hunt the horde of debilitation centaurs. This astonished Jason a lot, because he didn't expect to see the demonic three-eyed wolf here. Was it forced to retreat that far from the reclusive area? It was not like he flew through the whole Mythic Garden rift, but the distance he crossed was definitely not short. Even more so if one were to add the fact that his flying speed was faster than what most lowest lick stage beasts could cross in the same amount of time if they were to utilize their highest speed. There were many hindrances spanning over several dozen kilometers which he crossed by flying over or passing them, and now he should face the demonic three-eyed wolf. However, after observing how much wrath the demonic three-eyed wolf had accumulated during the last few months, he didn't see it. Jason could tell that something had happened. Either that or the fight against the petrification serpent was so devastating to the demonic three-eyed wolf's pride that it had started to hate everything that had similarities to it. This would include its curses, and the debilitation centaurs harbored a curse that was similar if not the same as the petrification serpent harbored. Jason felt bitter when he saw how the debilitation centaurs were torn apart because he wanted to test to see how strong their curse was on him, a halfling of the human and Celestia race. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like he would get the chance to do that, as the demonic three-eyed wolf's wrath seemed to be endless. From the looks of it, it would only stop after the whole race was annihilated. Retreating several dozen meters, Jason knew that he was unable to approach the demonic three-eyed wolf and debilitation centaurs, as he had heard too many shocking stories about the demonic three-eyed wolf's destruction curse. Furthermore, he had also seen it himself inside the underground cave when he was nearby the exposed mana vein. It may have been by utilizing his mana eyes, but it was more than enough for Jason to understand the destruction curse's lethality. Right now the demonic three-eyed wolf refrained from using the curse, as it was most likely saving up on mana if a stronger beast were to appear. Instead, it used its superior physical strength and darkness affinity to wreak havoc in the debilitation centaur's horde. Meanwhile, the debilitation centaurs had begun to split up, trying to escape in every direction except behind them, as death awaited them there. Splitting up was the best choice they could have done, and Jason had to acknowledge that. Unfortunately was only the fact that the majority of debilitation centaurs escaped in his direction. Because the debilitation centaurs had split up, the demonic three-eyed wolf targeted a specific direction too. Unsurprisingly, it took the direction where most preys were headed to. Jason couldn't help but exclaim, "SH*T," before he turned around to exert the weightless steps technique, accelerating his speed by 60%. Fortunately, the debilitation centaurs were only at the low and mid unblemished rank, which made it possible for Jason to increase the distance between them, while the demonic three-eyed wolf could easily catch up to every single debilitation centaur. In no time, they were slaughtered and torn apart, when Jason felt a curse targeting him. Goosebumps covered his whole body, thinking that it might be the demonic three-eyed wolf's destruction curse. Only to notice that his speed had declined. After that, it accelerated again, only to decelerate further. Jason found that it was weird, and turning around, he witnessed how the last debilitation centaur that runs in his direction was torn apart. However, only a moment later, his mana eyes were able to perceive how the centaur's curse had been utilized. This told Jason that he was currently targeted by the centaur's race individual weakening curse, which gave him the opportunity to see if and how much his soul world amplification had been decreased. Nevertheless, surviving was his highest priority right now, yet, Jason couldn't help but size up his own body for a short moment. Less than 2 seconds had passed, and a faint smile emerged on his face when he noticed that him being a Celestia didn't seem to matter much. The race-specific curse he was targeted with decreased his soul world amplification by 3–10%. This was extremely good, but also weird at the same time, because neither Iska nor Milan told him anything about an inconstant decline in one's soul world amplification while being cursed. As such, after trying to comprehend what was going on, Jason decided that the curse he had been targeted and the fact that his soul world was unique might be the cause for the soul world amplification weakening curse to move between 3–10%. Another reason was that Jason belonged to 2 races at once, which could have created a misconception for the curse. It might be possible that the curse would weaken him by 3% if he were to be from the Celestia race, while the same applied for the human race, with a weakening of the human race's soul world amplification by 10%. But that was not something he could easily figure out, and Jason couldn't help but wonder if the debilitation centaur's curse was reliable for him, or if he should search for other cursed beasts to form a soul bond contract with. However, more important for Jason was the fact that a low-lig stage beast with an extremely strong curse was several hundred meters behind him. He could only hope that the demonic three-eyed wolf's wrath towards the debilitation centaurs was large enough to disregard his own existence. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to escape his inevitable death. he didn't even dare to look back or breathe too loud as he rushed straight ahead, feeling as if he was enveloped by death itself. Seconds, a minute, 5 minutes had passed and the demonic three-eyed wolf had not reached him yet. This gave Jason the courage to take a look behind where he saw nothing except the wide flatlands. Sighing in relief, he felt as if he won the lottery. However, this didn't mean that he could slow down. The demonic three-eyed wolf could still follow his scent, which led Jason to manifest Artemis wings before he ascended into the air. Even if it was dangerous to remain in the air on the flatlands, Jason was sure that there has yet to be an existence like the demonic three-eyed wolf in the flatlands sky. More than half an hour passed and Jason didn't encounter a single beast, which was mainly thanks to his mana eyes. Nevertheless, he felt weird because the number of beasts he encountered was fewer than he expected. Were there a few beasts like the demonic three-eyed wolf, wreaking havoc, or were all beasts trying to approach the exposed mana vein, which caused them to migrate to the adjacent areas? Or is it something else? Jason tried to get the hand of the situation he might have to face when his mana eyes perceived something that made him ponder for a moment. There was a group of 10 young men and women surrounding a golden horned lion that had barely advanced to the lowest lick stage. From the looks of it, the group of humans was much stronger than the golden horned lion, but instead of killing it, more than 10 soulbonds tried their utmost efforts to inflict small injuries, targeting the lion's vital spots. Are they trying to catch the golden horned lion? Oh! Is that a blessing? Seeing how the golden horned lion's horn glowed up, which allowed it to release more mana for a short interval, allowed Jason to understand that the golden horned lion was a blessed beast and that the group of humans was trying to catch it. After the lion was caught, it was likely to be forced in forming a soul bond contract. Under normal circumstances, Jason wouldn't bother about the young men and women, but he wanted to know what happened in the flatlands. There were just too few beasts, and only a few lowest lick stage beasts he saw through his mana eyes. As such, he descended before he retraced Artemis wings as he ran towards the group of young men and women. Chapter 380 Tension by Hydesgrain. Jason was aware that it wouldn't be best if he were to approach the small group of young prodigies right now because the tension around them was enormous. They had to pay attention to the golden horned lion after all. Not only were they supposed to prevent injuring it too seriously, but it was also important that it wasn't allowed to injure their own soulbonds or comrades. Other than that, the surrounding area was dangerous and stronger beasts could arrive at any moment too. Yet, until now, nothing happened and everything went according to their plan. But who could reassure them that it would stay like this? Even after Jason was aware of all of that, he did not bother to hide his existence and the fact that he approached them. He was still wearing the pitch-black mask and his mana core was concealed, which were alarming factors to the person in charge of paying attention to the surroundings. The young man in charge of that task issued a warning to the group, whose tension intensified visibly. However, before anyone in the group could do something, Jason had already halted in his tracks. He was around 100 meters away from the group of young prodigies and would wait until they finished the current hunt before doing anything else. This worsened the group's tension further as they assumed Jason was going to attack them once they were off guard or finished their hunt, which would allow the unknown, mysterious masked prodigy, which they assumed Jason to be, to attack them. The group might be large, but their combat prowess was not the highest if one were to compare them to real prodigies from big clans. In the end, their family owed the Jewel clan a big favor to give them the opportunity to enter the Mythic Garden. They entered the Mythic Garden overconfident, only to notice that their strength was shallow, which was devastating. From the dream to contract mid-magical ranked beasts with strong blessings, the only beast they caught was the golden horned lion they were currently surrounding. After more than 4 months, this was the first and probably also the last blessed beast they were to catch. It was embarrassing, considering that they were a group of 10 young prodigies that wanted to get one blessed beast for each of them, but there was nothing they could do about it. This was also one reason which caused their tension to increase by a large margin. They wanted to increase their talents and combat prowess during their whole 6-month-long journey through the Mythic Garden, which was even more devastating than they had been told. Jason's strength was unknown to them, and their vigilance was the cause for the entire catching process to be postponed by more than 2 hours. The whole process looked like a charade to Jason, but on the other side, he was able to perceive the small group's tension. Aren't they too much? They have several beasts that entered the lowest lick stage not long ago. Shouldn't they be more confident? How could I be able to fight against more than 20 opponents with a higher mana core rank than me, at once at that? Did they forget the Rift's age restriction? Considering that someone above the age of 20 was unable to venture through the Rift, there shouldn't be such tension because of a single individual. Under normal circumstances, someone at this age should have 2 soul bonds at most. Adding the fact that beasts at a certain cultivation rank are prevented from being inside the Mythic Garden, they shouldn't be too afraid. The strongest beast Jason could have was a low lick stage beast. However, even he hadn't seen such a soul bond from any of the young prodigies he fought next to. Maybe some descendants of influential clans were hiding their soul bonds, but that was not something Jason could say for sure. Because Jason was aware of the group's tension, he decided to wait until one of them contracted the golden horned lion that laid unconscious and tied up next to them. From the beginning, he couldn't help but expect a large discussion to break out when the group caught the golden horned lion to decide who the blessed beast should belong to. However, on the contrary, Jason witnessed how everyone stepped back to give a young woman some space. Approaching the unconscious golden horned lion, she led a thread of her soul towards her hand which she had cut. Around 20 minutes later, the golden horned lion was bound by the young woman as a magic circle appeared below it. The lion entered the woman's soul world, which was the signal Jason waited for. Walking towards the group that was still tensed up, Jason couldn't help but suppress laughing out. It was fortunate that he wore a mask, otherwise, he would enrage the group of young prodigies. Nevertheless, in order to prevent a misunderstanding or accident to occur, Jason said out loud, "Don't bother too much about me, I just wanted to ask 1 or 2 questions, if that's fine with all of you. The golden horned lion is not a beast I'm interested in either." The tension substituted by a small margin after the small group heard what Jason said. They were unsure whether his words were trustworthy or not. However, that was not something that concerned Jason when one young man in the group stepped forward to speak for his group. "Hello, I apologize if this sounds rude, but we wouldn't feel comfortable if you were to come closer. You are a stranger and we have seen many betrayals during the last few months. We will listen to your questions, but I hope that you can understand our cautiousness." Jason nodded his head, fully understanding why the young men and women were so vigilant against him. He was a stranger with a concealed mana core and wore a mask to disguise his identity too. As such, he just asked straightforwardly, "I ventured through the flatlands and noticed that there were only a few beasts. According to my information, the flatlands should be the most populated area within the Mythic Garden. Do any of you know why that is the case? You waited several hours to ask us that," was what everyone in the small group of young men and women asked themselves. Yet, they didn't voice out the question as to the young man who spoke to Jason earlier. "We are not sure about the reason for that, but it should have had something to do with the amount of mana in the adjacent areas that is slowly but consistently increasing. Furthermore, we heard lots of loud sounds of different beasts during the last few days. That means there could be a few stronger beasts slaughtering a few groups of beasts." Nodding his head, Jason already estimated that to be the case before he asked the second question. "Okay, thanks. How about one-eyed rats? Did you guys encounter such beasts in the surrounding areas?" This question caused the young prodigies to tense up as the young man hesitantly said, "Yeah, we encountered them, but they were pursued by the demonic three-eyed wolf not long ago. Its destructive curse killed 3 friends of ours. The demonic three-eyed wolf hunted the one-eyed rats too." Jason mumbled subconsciously, which caused the young man to unintentionally blurt out as he had a bad premonition. What does that mean, too? Lifting his head to look at the young man, Jason couldn't help but sigh as he said, I encountered the demonic three-eyed wolf today, probably a few hours before I found you guys. It hunted the debilitation centaur horde. Doesn't that mean it is close to us? Everyone exclaimed loudly as thunderous roars echoed through the surrounding landscapes. Looks like it.